Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Welcome, audience. Thank you. There are seats in the front if you'd like to move up. We are here today to hopefully finalize the 2024 budget. We'll see how it goes. There is no approval of minutes tonight because we don't have minutes, but I would imagine next time we meet we'll have those. So, Bill, do we want to move on to the Selectmen's report?
Okay, thank you. Last week the Selectmen met with the Whipple committee, and we agreed to limit the scope of the rehab project for this building in Bucher to the $600,000 that was voted on by the voters at last town meeting. With costs having escalated and so on, to do all the things they wanted to do would be something close to $780,000, and we told them they only had $600,000 to spend. We approved the withdrawal of about $35,000 from the Haddad Fund for the bog project that I described in my last report, and we discussed solar panels on the roof of the fire station and the possibility of withdrawing money from the Energy Capital Reserve Fund for that project if and when we decide to go ahead with it. We instructed the Energy Committee to go back and do the detailed work necessary. It's a project of about $150,000 that would have a 30% credit to it, so the net would be about $105,000. And we discussed a plan for engaging the community in the $375,000 land purchase. There'll be more of that at tomorrow night's Selectmen's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Bill? All right. Kim, do you want to put you on the spot here? Do you want to walk us? Everybody should have a new packet in front of them. Just a quick overview of the packet for everybody.
Okay, so those of you that have the green sheet, that is a change from the emailed tax rate calculator that I emailed. There were two among you, and I won't say who, but two noticed that the number used for the appropriation amount was off. So that's the correct amount there. You also have the updated budget worksheets. There are two packets. One has the percentage change and one doesn't. So it's those two, I think they're 22 pages long each packet. That is, they should be the same numbers. Again, they just have the changes to the percentages. You also should have sheets that have color, and that is information that Colin emailed you prior to this meeting a couple of weeks ago about capital reserve funds. And we also gave you the comparative budgets. So that should all be there.
Great, thanks. So in a second, we're going to move to Colin, but I'd say for the committee members, you may have lots of notes in the budget sheets that you've used over the past couple months. So you may want to have that handy as we begin talking through each of the departmental budgets. But you can also use the new packet because those are the numbers that we would be voting on outside of any amendments or proposals from budget committee members. Does that make sense? Awesome. Why don't we transition over to Colin, who wanted to discuss the capital reserve funds and potentially using that as part of the operating budget. Do you want to just talk a little bit about, I know also Melissa and Hannah were not here last time, so it would also be new information for them.
So, I'll be happy to. So do you want me to just sort of introduce it and then we'll go through it on a budget by budget basis? How do you want to work?
Yeah, that's a good question. So let's introduce it. Joe is also here from the chair of the trustees. We can talk a little bit about that. What I thought we could do is to go through the operating budget after that, since many of your proposals, and I know John has some proposals, to remove dollars out of the operating budget.
Yeah.
So I think it just makes sense to go through the operating budget.
Yeah.
And during that, I think we can make
Address
those
these
proposals.
items.
Correct.
Yeah, so Joe, by the way, thanks for showing up. I'm sure that it's not the top of your list of things to do on a Wednesday evening. For the purpose of the folks who weren't able to be here last week, what I went through is I went through a number of annual reports to collect information on what the warrant articles had indicated for each of these topics, and I compared the reserve account balances in 2023, what we propose to add to those reserve account balances in 2024, what that balance would look like in 2024 year end. Those are the colored ones that you can see on the sheet I handed out to everybody. And then I laid out the 2024 budget request. And one of the things that I wanted to talk about, and we can go through it on a piece-by-piece basis when we go through the budget, is whether or not there's an opportunity to leverage the reserve funds to draw down or quote-unquote pay for what is being proposed in the account balances, the account expense sheets. And what I did is on page 3 of the document that I sent out to everybody, I laid out by reserve fund all of the line items that might be applied from the operating budget against that reserve fund so that we could identify what that means. So for example, when we look at town vehicle and equipment repair, we have, I'm rounding up, $149,000 in the budget for town equipment and town vehicle and equipment repair. And so the question is whether or not, and as far as I can tell, we haven't expended money out of the account, and there appears to be no plan to spend money out of the account. I was actually at the deliberative session this weekend, and one of the things that came up from a gentleman speaking was, what is the goal of each of these reserve accounts? It was actually a very interesting question. And some of the school department funds actually had a goal, and some of them didn't, and I can't recall who spoke, but they were thinking about trying to put a goal on all of them. And maybe we ought to talk about that, Bill, as you know, what the select board can think about. But there is no, in the example I'm using for town vehicle and equipment, there's no forecasted use of that fund. And so we have $149,000 are going to be spent in this year's budget. We've got some reserves, and the theory of the case that we'll talk about when we go through each of the departments is, why can't we use a reserve account? It's there for a rainy day. I can't imagine there's any more of a rainy day than we are in today, where the budget is going through the roof. Inflation is going through the roof. To the extent there's an opportunity we can draw down on the operating budget by leveraging the reserves, that's what I propose. So, Joe, you might have some thoughts? And then we can go through the department budget.
Great, yeah.
If anybody has any questions, Mark?
Yes, thank you. Could just somebody explain to me why we wouldn't support this? Is there a reason we wouldn't be supporting this proposal?
Okay, so Kim's going to back me up on, in case I say something wrong, but the trust fund trustees are responsible for the final decision, I would say, in terms of taking money out of a trust fund and paying it to the town or to any other authority. So it comes down to the question of, for a particular fund that's something like a capital reserve fund, which was put aside for, say, buying a new fire engine, that's the purpose of the fund. We can't necessarily, we don't have the authority to transfer the money to a non-purpose that the fund was purposed for. From talking to Kim, I understand that if the town wanted to change the purpose of a fund, that's a town meeting decision. But I should say the trustees operate independently of any body in this town. We're told at our orientation meetings that we report to the Attorney General's office and the voters. And so if somebody can make a strong case to change their mind, we're certainly willing to listen to somebody. But it's the three of us that has the final decision on what can be spent out of a fund.
So, Joe, I just so that there's, and we maybe during the course of the conversations we can talk about it. That's why I went through all the annual reports and I pulled out the warrant article definitions. And so the page 3 proposals of correlating the operating budget line items to the reserve accounts, I don't believe that I'm violating any defined purpose of any of those warrant articles. I've correlated what is being defined in those warrant articles with what is the line item in the budget.
Okay,
I'm not looking for any redefinition.
There's only one hurdle that I have to get over, and maybe you can convince me or not, but all these warrant articles that you were talking about were passed under revised statute 35-1, which defines capital expenditures.
Right.
And these are and the things that you're talking about are not capital expenditures. If you ask the average voter in this town what a capital expenditure is, they're going to say it's like a building or a truck or a piece of land, et cetera, not maintenance of normal operating expense equipment.
So 35-1 actually talks about the construction, reconstruction, acquisition of a specific capital improvement or the acquisition of a specific item or specific items of equipment. And when you take a look at Article 2 and some of the warrant articles in the annual reports, like in the 2021, it talks about capital and non-capital reserve funds. So the reserve funds are actually, at least according to the categories in our annual report, are capital and non-capital reserve funds. And the warrant in Section 35, you know, capital is an interesting concept. You know, if capital is according to the accounting rules where it's a major investment, then one would actually take, and I would think we would want to take a hard look at, I don't know of any equipment repair which would be defined as capital in any shape, way, or form. So the equipment repair item is likely to be a non-capital reserve fund, according to the rules in
So what would you classify as the capital expenditure within the relative operations of the town business?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess we'd have to get someone who would define capital for us. I don't know. I'm just going by what I'm reading in the legislation and in the warrant articles and what it is we're talking about as far as expenses. And clearly some of these expenses, at least according to the accounting theory of capital, is not capital. I don't know whether the public sector definition of capital is different than the non-public and the not-for-profit definition of capital, but I'm guessing they're very similar. And some of these items are absolutely not capital expenditures.
Okay, well, I was just going to give you a little tidbit of what my former boss told me. I worked 10 years in government accounting for 2 school districts. One was the city of Cleveland, which was a 77,000 kid population with 120 buildings,
Yep.
and one was a smaller school district of 5,500 kids with 8 buildings.
Yep.
And he told me when I went to work for him, he said, Joe, you're coming out of a corporate America. You got to remember, in corporate America, you can do anything you want to do unless it's illegal. In the government, you can only do the things that are allowed by law.
Right.
So that's the dilemma that we have. We have to find capital items as a specific type of asset to purchase, then it decides, is that a piece of capital or is that operating expense or maintenance expense?
So I don't know who arbitrates, and maybe Kim, you need to weigh in here. Who would arbitrate, if you take a look at the warrant article for, again to my example, town vehicle and equipment repair, if you read that, it doesn't infer capital at all. When you sit and talk, if we sat and talked through with the department heads how they want to spend money on town vehicles and equipment repair, I'm guessing that would not be capital. I could be wrong, but I'll bet you dollars for donuts that a good part of that $149,000 are expense items to fix things. Unless it's a major reinvestment of capital, it's unlikely to be quote unquote capital. So I don't know how we arbitrate that. That's a question for you, Ken.
Pop in on this?
Joe wants to say something first.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Joe.
I think in an effort to move this along, I mean, the term that we're getting hung up on is clearly capital.
Yeah.
And I think this will play itself out because, I mean, I think we need to refer to these funds at this point, and then we'll get to the funds we're going to direct them at as reserve funds. And the reason I say let's talk about them as reserve funds right now is we clearly have had articles to establish funds over the years that were so specific that Article 17, I can't tell you which year, was to see if the town would vote to establish a non-capital reserve fund. All right, so here we have right in the name of that fund, it's a non-capital reserve fund, but it is a reserve fund, and you're in charge of the reserve funds. The final say is going to come down to the selectmen, the trustees, but and again, I think as who's ever going to propose any changes in the operating budget, this is not a steady diet, a standard practice that we do this all the time. I think what some people have contended they're going to attempt to do is, listen, if we remove a line item, for example, this one I just happened to pull up, is a non-capital reserve fund under the provisions of RSA 35-1C for the purpose of computer maintenance and replacement. Now, in budgeting lingo, Joe, you and I would agree that it's maintenance and it's replacement of, could be everyday computers. So do we call a laptop for $1,000 capital anymore? You know, I think we have to go down, and I don't think there's an inordinate amount of these things that we're going to have to address and say, all right, here is a budget line for $25,000 that was just put in for computer maintenance. In this particular tough fiscal time, can we eliminate that line item and then ask the selectmen as agents to expend, because they're the ones, and only if they've been given that authority, so it doesn't have to go to a vote, to say, all right, this year we'll pull $25,000 out for that computer maintenance item for some department. So I think we're going to, in order to address this, we can talk hypothetically and theoretically in going through this, but I think it's going to present itself clearer if we get some real line items and then look at a real reserve fund that's already in place and then talk about it.
Right. I think Joe answered Colin's question. Why does it say at the top of the list of them capital and non-capital? And that's why. RSA 35:1-C allows for non-capital reserve funds authorized. So we could have funds, and there's one right there, that would allow operating expenses. We don't have a lot of them, and I think some of them we have sort of used that way, like the town buildings repair maintenance capital reserve fund. That used to be for big-ticket items, the fire department roof, $87,050. We have started to do smaller things. Now, when we were talking about this building, I went to Joe and the trustees to ask, what could we spend out of that account? Could we spend the Dennis Myers study out of that fund, because it's going to give us an idea as to how we repair this building? And they said, no, that's not capital. You can't do that. And so when Joe talks about we need their permission, they're not going to hand the money over unless they think it's a proper expenditure. So in this conversation here, yes, we could have capital reserves for what you're talking about. And I think that's a bigger discussion. It's a policy discussion that should be had about all of the capital reserves. What is the specific purpose? Has the purpose changed over time? Should we have expendable trust funds, which is more like these non-capital ones? Should we have more of them? You know, the department heads here, I mean, we're happy that Colin is not talking, or I don't think anyone else, about not spending the money that they've asked for. We're not talking about not spending the money. We're only talking about where is it going to come from.
That's right.
Department heads wouldn't know which fund it came from, nor would they really care. What they're going to be concerned about, though, is the capital reserve funds or the expendable trust funds or whatever fund we're calling it, is it going to be enough to deal with the things we see coming down the road? And maybe we have to have a better discussion about what do we see coming down the road. The equipment, the town vehicles and equipment capital reserve fund, the thought there was that there could be an engine that goes. I don't know how much an engine in a fire truck costs, but it's a lot. To me, that would be a capital expense, an engine, something big like that. So there are some things of vehicle repairs that would be capital in my mind. But I'm not an accountant, so I don't really know what a legal definition of capital is, but to me, it's a big ticket item that lasts a long time. Joe wants to pipe in here, so.
One thing about, when you talked about computers, basically, if it's lasting more than a year, if it's expected to last more than a year, then it's considered a capital item. And, you don't capitalize stuff that's like $500. Okay, so like 1,000, every organization has a different threshold of what they would do capital versus non-capital. Okay, so you might say something under 10 grand is not capital. Okay, it's up to the organization within the law to define the levels, but generally over a year of working capability. So a PC, I would hope you would buy PCs that expect to last more than a year. Okay?
Joe, are there equivalent GAAP rules for purposes of capital definition?
Is there what now?
Are there GAAP rules, are there rules, accounting rules for public sector capital definition?
I have not been able to find any yet. Kim was looking, I think we haven't found that yet, but there are some definitions in investors type of material that define what capital expenditures are. And it's really basically simply, people would think, okay, that building is a capital expense because it's going to be there for a while. That set of tires on the chief's car, that's not capital. They're not going to be there a long time. I mean, a lot of it's common sense. And I would just point out, in case everybody's thinking they're going to be able to transfer a ton of money out of the town vehicle fund, the balance of that fund is a little under $30,000, and there's no money slotted to be put in next year. So you're looking for $148,000. Only got like 30.
No, I understand, that's what the chart lays all that out, so obviously, if that fund would be used, it could only be used up to what's in the fund. But the reason why I asked about the gap rules is that back when I worked, PCs were a little more expensive than they are now, and we were expensing them, and the life wasn't necessarily the only component associated with it, so that's why I asked. But anyway, go ahead, Mark.
Thank you so much for clearing that up for me. I do have a process question. Joe, you were saying that you're going to take a line item out, and then we'll go find money, and so that line item is actually removed? I'm a little confused on that part of what you were saying.
Well, first of all, I'm not going to do anything. This is, we're getting ready here to dive in and go through department by department. And the only reason for my explanation is to say, and Joe's done a great job. I mean, I like the year reference, that if it's capital, it's got to last more than a year. So we're not looking to go into these reserve funds to spend on an annual basis things that should always be in the operating budget. But if there were an item that we came across, and maybe it's computer support that we've got, let me put my glasses back on, and I would have to look how that reserve fund was set up. Someone find me the balance that's in the...
Computer maintenance?
Line 2, Joe.
Yeah. What's going to be the balance? Balance as of June 30th, 2024 is what?
So line 2...
I'm sorry, 2022.
The end of the year...
Oh, I got it, 42, right?
I don't know where you are, Joe.
I'm looking at the capital reserve fund projections, the balances. We don't need to get into that right now. Mark, I'm just simply saying, to answer your question so we can move on, is if we found a situation that of the 30 items Chief Cobb has in her budget broken down, there was one line that she was asking for $15,000, and we did find that we could pull it out of the reserve fund this year, we would simply say, can we zero it out there and that line item with the assurance that it's going to come, it's still going to be bought and paid for, but only out of the reserve fund.
That line item would be there next year.
Absolutely.
Well, I think it would be there, the line item would be there, but it doesn't mean, Chief made a good proposal or a suggestion that when you see that the following year, there's a chance that the budget will look much bigger the following year because you've removed it from the operating budget, right? And not to say sticker shock isn't a thing, but again, if you're starting to take all this money out of the operating budget and using capital reserves to pay, next year that budget's going to be, that operating budget, again, it's all coming out of the same pot eventually.
But optics-wise.
But optics-wise, it's going to look larger. Bill?
Can I just motor back up to 10,000 feet and get us back to November and just remind you that when the Selectmen presented this budget to you, we presented it as a budget of 2.4% increase. It's now down to 2.3%, and as I understand much of the discussion that's going on now, it's a desire to move the money out of operating and capital reserves, but not to change the bottom line. So it seems to me that is a bit of a sort of moving things around on the table that we have to explain to the taxpayer why it was important to do that. So that's number one. I want to just get back to the point that we believe, the Selectmen, this is now a $8.981 million budget, and the fact that some of it's capital reserves and some of it is operating expense is immaterial to
Correct.
taxpayer. And second of all, this has been a great discussion for the last couple of meetings, because it's exactly what we want to do in the spring. We want to sit down with Joe and his gang. We want to talk about goals. I think, Colin, that was absolutely a great point that was made on Saturday. We want to talk about the purpose of each fund. We want to talk about how much capital reserves should we have? How much should we be using for debt? Should we be doing capital reserves for a fire engine to be bought in 15 years that a lot of the current taxpayers won't be around to enjoy that
Speak for
fire
yourself.
engine? Et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, speak for myself, yes. And a couple of the rest of us here. So I think we have teed up here a really valuable discussion, but right now we don't. We're sort of at a point where we haven't talked about what these issues, and to suddenly decide that we're going to try to make on-the-fly decisions is, I think, troublesome to the selectmen.
Yeah, agreed. And I also want to bring up, and Joe, I'll turn it back over to you. I also want to bring up that, Bill, the selectmen are going to be discussing budget tomorrow, correct? And if money's taken out of the operating budget, the selectmen still could put money back into capital reserves if it went that way.
I'm not going to comment on what might
I
happen
understand.
tomorrow.
I'm just saying that
Yeah.
opportunity still
I'm
exists.
going to focus on tonight, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So why don't, I think, Joe, you go ahead and then we'll dive
Well,
in.
I was just going to say, as a citizen, and putting aside the trustees' part, I am more of a proponent of saving for the future in slow, moderate increases. This has been a bad year for inflation. I understand exactly what's going on in terms of the town budgets. Everybody in this town, as a person that has to buy materials and food, understand what inflation has meant to their individual budgets. You got to realize that people that voted for these capital expenditures additions in the past years were under the mindset that it's better to have save for the future a little bit each year rather than getting chunked for $1.5 million fire fund.
Right.
So that's all I gotta say about that.
Okay. So why don't we do this, if everyone's amenable to it, we can start going through the department budgets, and then obviously I know there will be some proposals to amend. We can do that as we cover. So what we'd like to do, and Kim will keep us honest, is we will go through department by department, so you have your comparative budget. We'll start with executive and work our way through each of those department budgets. Some will require lots of discussion, some probably none. So do we want to start with executive?
Let's start with executive. That's where I am, so no discussion, people. Okay,
So
executive.
that's page one on your budget sheets.
I want the
So
first time. I'm number one.
do you want to just give us the bottom line for each of
So
those?
I'll give the bottom line, and then if there are any questions about any of the lines in there, shout them out.
Sure.
Okay, so executive, proposed 2024 budget, $558,956.
Any discussions?
Can I ask a question? Are we going to go to the point of, we finish a department,
We
as
would
a group, we're going to vote on it?
vote each department, yes.
Okay.
So we'll be taking lots of votes, lots of ayes or nays tonight.
Well, I'll make a motion that we accept the 558,956 for the executive budget as printed.
Any discussions? All those in favor? Aye. All right.
Next, we have town clerk and elections, $127,479.
Any discussion?
Make a motion to accept the 127,479.
All those in favor? Aye.
Finance, $424,438.
Discussions?
Yeah, I had proposed, that we add $25,000 to that to come up with software to handle the, can we still call it capital reserves? But, yeah, and I think we need to do that, but I think we also need to look at our overall software and see if we can't have more integrated software. So I don't think this is the year to put that 25,000 on there, and I'd like to see it taken off. For anybody who wants to know, it's 014150-100-342-01.
Yeah, it's on page 3.
Page 3, 5 lines down. So are you making a proposal, an amendment to the budget?
Yeah,
Well, how about this? How about we do any discussions on John's proposal?
I'm just trying to get clarity as to what is that number?
So that was the new software that Lynn had proposed?
Financial analysis software?
Correct.
Okay.
Any questions for John or any discussions on that?
Well, I mean, I think our ability to do expense and capital analysis is important. The kind of work I went through when I had to go through page by page, as I understand the software being described, Lynn will be able to take the data and spin it like Excel spreadsheets in many different ways. We could do a lot of analysis at a budget item level as opposed to departmental level. So I'm not in favor of that cut. I think it's important for us to be able to do software and budget analysis.
Lou, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Colin. I think having the appropriate software so that the town can work in the most expeditious and professional and an accurate manner is vital to the workings of this organization. And I think I would not vote for it.
And if I could add, I'm sorry, I just wanted to add, the other part of it is the forecasting part of it. If we were to really understand the impact of our decisions 2-3 years out from now, it's hard for Lynn to do that. She's got to do it all manually versus having a software tool that can spin that out and we can understand it. And Lynn, if I'm misrepresenting the software, please tell me.
No, that is what the software can do, and it can allow you guys to actually go look at your reports and pull what you want to see too, so. You're representing.
I don't disagree with what the reason for having this software. As a matter of fact, we looked like we were going to do away with this line item before, and they argued for it. But looking at our overall software right now, I think we need to be looking at an integrated approach to this. I also think that Colin has brought up huge things that we need to look into very closely before we commit to a software. And I think this year would be a good year to put off the $25,000 while we pursue these other items. Lynn presented 3 different softwares of hugely different costs, and I think with a little experience and a little work on our part, that we could really zero in on a more integrated software approach to this whole thing. So I'm looking forward to reducing this budget by $25,000 just for this year, but I don't want to give up on the capital reserve, following it more closely with software package.
Bill, go ahead.
So this is one of the 3 topics that the Selectmen have agreed that they want to talk about after next year, capital reserves being one, integrated software, all the software we have around that we use in the town, and the dispatch communications fees. So this would be one of those 3 things that we've already committed to discussing in the new year, and the Selectmen continue to be opposed to including it in this year's budget.
Okay. Joe, do you have a?
Yeah, I'm glad you spoke, Bill. I was going to ask you that specifically. My recollection was this was an item that the Selectmen did not recommend, the $25,000 this year, that we do take a broader look at the software needs. I am in agreement that any tool that we can use that will help us moving forward is important. And again, this is one of those gray areas where I'm not so sure that $25K couldn't come out of an expendable reserve fund and zero that line out. But I'm in favor of zeroing that out. Now, just to be clear, Bill had also said something that and if you look as Budget Committee members on your comparison, comparative budgets, we're looking at 85, 510, 260 in operations, general operations, and 471, 500. So going into reserves, that's what's getting us to 2.3. If we were to eliminate that $25,000, it's not a matter of moving it from that top line to the other line. It's coming out of a reserve fund. So our in fact, out-of-pocket cost that we'll be accounting for this year will actually decrease. So I think this is one area where we could move the $25,000 out of this line.
Any other discussions? So is the thought, to Joe's question, to have that come out of capital reserves versus operating budget? I just want to be clear. That's not what
He's just asking to take it off.
Correct, but am I mishearing to use capital reserves to pay for that software?
I can't speak to that because I don't know if there's a reserve fund that's earmarked for that.
No, okay.
No.
Okay. Are there any other discussions on finance? I want to see any other proposals before we potentially make an amendment to a bottom line. So, John, do you want to make a proposal to amend the budget?
Yes, I would like to move that we remove the $25,000 appropriation, line item 014150100342-01 for the capital reserve software.
Which would bring the total line item to $399,438. Any seconds to John's proposal?
I'll second.
Okay. All those in favor of the amendment? What do you got? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So what do we do with the 5? Fails. Okay.
I'm sorry, what is it?
It's fail. It was 5 to 5.
Tie is a fail?
Tie. Yeah, it was a tie.
How is a tie a fail?
I was a no. You were a yes. You were a yes. You voted for the amendment. Correct. So the no's to the amendment.
To leave it in, right?
Yeah, to leave it in.
It's 5. Okay, fails.
Okay.
So procedurally, what does that mean?
So procedurally then, John could make another amendment to continue to reduce costs if he wanted to, or somewhere else. Or someone could make a motion to vote on the final total budget of 424, 438.
No, I apologize. Procedurally, what happened to that particular vote at a 5-5 tie?
Right, there's no change.
It failed.
It failed.
Oh, so the motion failed?
Correct.
Gotcha, thank you.
Yes. So unless there are any other potential amendments, someone could make a motion to vote on.
We vote on the 424, 438.
I'll second that.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
Not to state the obvious, but why couldn't everybody who voted yes to the amendment to remove the 25,000 just not vote to approve this number now as is?
They could, or they could change their vote to say, fine, we'll do the 424.
Okay, just checking.
So
We could potentially go round and round for a long time.
That's, okay.
That's government. Okay. So we have a motion on the floor for 424. Did we have a second?
I second it.
Second. All those in favor? For the,
24 is the existing budget. Gotcha.
That's as presented.
Yeah, as presented.
as presented.
Yep.
So we have 6 yeas. All those opposed? Okay, passes.
And this is a good example of why you don't have an even number on a board.
Yeah,
Just saying, 10. I don't know what they were thinking.
I think that's your fault.
I wasn't even here when this, and it could have been a mistake. I think town meeting meant 9, including a selectman, but I think somebody said 9, and then they added the selectmen, right? Who? Okay, anyway, okay, so we are done with finance, which does include tax collector. Everybody's aware of that, right? Okay. Let's go to assessing. The amount for assessing is $92,500,
Top of page 4.
and it
Any-
includes
any-
also the tax map update. So the assessing is $92,500.
Any discussions?
We'll move the number, move the question.
Any seconds or discussion? Okay, So for 92,500, all those in favor? Ayes have it.
Next up, we have legal, which also includes animal rescue fees. The amount is $10,500.
Discussions or motion? Any seconds?
Melissa?
Melissa, second. All those in favor? Aye. Ayes have it.
Next up, we have what we call personnel administration. It's $131,500.
Discussions? Any seconds?
Second it.
All those in favor? Great. And if I miss any nays, please let me know. Shout it out.
Zoning and planning, $115,731.
Any discussions first before we make a motion? Okay, seeing none, any motions? Seconds?
Second.
All those in favor? Okay.
Next up, general government buildings, $219,925.
Discussions?
Move the 219,
Any-
125.
Any seconds? All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Cemeteries, $32,935.
Seconds? Melissa? All right. All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Other insurance, $123,000.
Second.
Joe seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Advertising and Regional Association, $19,259.
Bill?
I would note here in going through my notes that we had a written submittal by the Chamber of Commerce to increase that by $2,500 that we never discussed. I'm not in favor of increasing it. The selectmen believe the number there is correct, but I think we should remind the board that that we had that written request that we never discussed.
So is that 19,259 with the addition?
No, it's without the addition.
Without the addition, okay. Any discussions?
Did we ever get Ashley by any chance, or finding out what does she want to do with that increase?
The letter we got said she wanted to hire an intern.
Any other questions for Bill? If someone could make a motion for an amendment, if they want to add the 2,500.
I make a motion to add
Okay, so we have a second. So that would bring the total.
You want me to just give that to them?
Mark made the motion and Lou
Right.
seconded.
Well, the new total's 21,759.
21,759. So we're voting on the amendment to add 2,500 for 21,759. All those in favor of the amendment? All those opposed? The nays have it. All right, so now we need to make a motion on what's stated 19,259. Anybody want to make a motion for the? So moved. Any seconds? All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Next up, we have police, $1,507,104.
Okay. I know there'll be discussions. Who's first? John.
Chief, first is some question. Huh? Oh, okay. Yeah. First question is sort of this and dispatch 2 with your new software. How does this affect computer license, computer support for both operations?
I don't know exactly when we'll be up and operational with the new software, so I don't want to remove anything out of our operating budget for the current software that we currently pay for and use every day.
Okay. The other thing is, I'd like to propose a deal. You get your guns and we get your car
So can you,
for a year. I think we can hold off on the command car for, that has 70,000 miles on it for 1 year.
so what are you making?
I'm asking that we reduce the $70,000 from the budget for that car.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
So my understanding is there's been Chief Cobb already offered a reduction, well, I have to look at the line item, for the new pistols.
I think it was 14,000.
So this would really entail increasing that line item to get you the pistols you'd like to have this year, increasing that 14,000 and holding off?
I think what John is proposing is that we get the pistols as proposed minus that 14,000.
Oh, okay, I just want to be clear.
And taking away the cruiser.
Chief, can you
but-
before you respond to that, can you just refresh our memory on what the remaining pistols budget was going to spend? I think some of it was
Yes.
on duty and some of it was off duty. Is that right?
Yep. So I had decreased the amount of duty pistols from 16 to 14, and the off-duty pistols would be issued only to full-time employees as opposed to part-time employees as well. So it was a decrease, and we had gotten some updated pricing, so it was a decrease of 14,000. I would offer to the Budget Committee, though, by delaying the purchase of a cruiser, I think that's going to put us in a really tight spot in fiscal year '25, because we'll be that much more behind the 8 ball, quite frankly. And I think that it's going to be, it could potentially be double or triple of what it might be in the coming years if we forego a cruiser this year. Keeping in mind that historically we've purchased 1 cruiser every year, and that had worked well for us in the past. Again, we had that opportunity to purchase 2 cruisers at one time, which worked out very well. But I think it would be not advantageous to put off a cruiser for another year.
Any questions for Chief?
I just have a comment. I appreciate the input. I think that perhaps, Bill, the Select Board should look at policies around equipment vehicle retirement. I wonder if we stretch this elastic band and say we're going to skip a year and then start a year, going forward. I think now you try to retire a car for 100,000 miles. I don't know how long we've been using 100,000 miles as criteria. Cars last a lot longer than 100,000 miles today. So I don't know, maybe it's 125,000 miles, maybe it's 130,000 miles. But this is an area where we might want to spend some time talking about it.
Go ahead, Bill.
Certainly, we can do that, Colin. I think the issue here is that there has been a policy for a number of years now, going back to my first term on the Board of Selectmen, to replace one cruiser a year as a normal operating expense. The use of these cars is different than the cars that you and I drive in terms of the frequency with which they're driven, different drivers twice a day, and so on, with the exception of the Chief's car. I don't think you probably have a second driver on that one, but maybe you do sometimes. But that basically the wear and tear on the car is substantial, and that the maintenance bills begin to mount up. So we can review that policy. We can review lots of policies, but as of now, the policy continues to be to replace 1 vehicle per year.
My only concern is, a year ago we spent $40,000 on a car. Now we're spending $70,000 on a car. I know there's some people, Chris, who thought that maybe next year it might be more expensive, it might be less expensive, but we're talking about almost 100% increase in price. I would suggest that we defer that policy for 1 year.
Well, we can look at the policy. I think the chief. I think the chief explained to us when she put her proposal forward, both when she talked to the selectmen and again to this board, that this car has additional equipment on it that causes part of the price to be higher.
I'd also say that's not for the budget committee to decide a policy for mileage.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, I mean, if it's a policy, it's got to be in writing, so
Yeah.
it might be a practice or it might be a tradition, but I don't think it's in writing. So put that aside, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm on the record as saying I disagree with the chief, with all due respect, chief, and I agree with what John is suggesting.
Well, I mean, I drive the Cruiser every day, so I think I would certainly know best. I mean, it's a 2015 Cruiser that we're looking to replace as well. So that Cruiser, if we wait another year to replace it, is going to be going on 9-10 years as a police vehicle. And again, the mileage might be low for some folks, but again, these vehicles are not driven in a normal fashion. We have to be able to get to where we need to go in a timely and safe manner.
And it's
I would also...
also used as a control center, right? I
Yes.
remember with you and Jay talking
Yes,
about
exactly.
the use of it, yes.
Yep, precisely.
Okay.
And in the past, the new Cruiser had overexpended on that line item quite a bit, and that was a conversation we had a couple of years ago. I think it was Joe, actually, that had suggested we start putting more money in that because it just wasn't cutting it anymore. It hadn't been increased for many, many years. So I would offer to the board that I think it's time to replace that Cruiser.
Joe, go ahead.
Well, I like my bargaining. Give you back the guns and let's hold up the car for a year, because I do see the needs for the guns. So yes, Bill, there was a period of time we were putting money in capital reserves for cars, and then they became an expense item. So whether they're capital or whatever they are, these are just now expensed. So we did buy one every year until we bought two.
Right, and we don't have one in the budget, in our current year budget, in our
Right.
fiscal year '23 budget.
Right.
So 25 would have a car and a cruiser.
At least, yes.
Yep.
So no ability to kick it back and continue 1 year? No.
Well, and again, I think this was what I was talking about when initially this conversation came up was, you know, I took this Cruiser out of the budget this year, out of fiscal year '23, for the reason that we had that opportunity present itself. So I certainly didn't feel right asking for another car when you were already agreeing to spend more money. But I don't want to see things that are taken out of an operating budget 1 year not put in the next year because we feel like we can take it from another pot of money or another bucket of money. I think it's important to include it in the operating budget so that we can be as transparent as possible with the folks that look at really just the operating budget to see what comes out of it.
So next year, you would potentially be looking, you're looking at the cost of a cruiser, you're looking at $106,000 without any cost increases for your car and a cruiser, which I would
The
imagine.
Chargers might be a different cost than
Right.
like a Tahoe or a, yep.
I would say that's minimum, right?
Yep.
Probably more because they'll be more expensive.
Yeah.
Right.
It would be really nice if all the equipment would transfer over from Charger to Charger, but I don't know if they'll even be making Chargers in fiscal year '25, so
Okay.
I would like
Chris.
to go back to the days of the Crown Vic personally, but those cars were great.
Go ahead, Lou.
Yeah, I think as a committee, as the Budget Committee, we should be both thrifty and prudent. And I think this motion is just thrifty. I don't think it's prudent because the folks on the ground, on the trenches, are exposing their lives. When you step on a police vehicle, when an officer steps in a police vehicle, we expect that vehicle to work now then 100% of the time. And a vehicle that is starting to age beyond its limitations is not what I consider to be in the best interest of our support for our people in blue. Thank you.
I just recently had to replace the power distribution box in the Durango, and that's not a good feeling when you go out of your house in the morning to start the car and it's dead beyond all recognition. I had to replace something for the air conditioning a couple years ago, so there are some pretty major mechanical issues that are starting to happen with the Durango, the Cruiser that I currently drive.
Okay. So I want to go back to John's original proposal, which is to remove the $70,000 for the command car. Which, can you give us the new? And before I do that, though, sorry, any other proposals for police? Colin, go ahead.
Yeah, so this is one of the areas where we could talk about the capital reserves. Did I read the data correctly? Did the PC get pulled out of the operating expense?
Yes.
Okay. So the other category that I thought was account 366, which is on page 8. 366 is radio repair and replacement for $10,000. And there's a capital reserve for police equipment. Line 9 on the spreadsheet I sent out. That, as far as I can tell, there hasn't been any expenditures out of that, nor are there any planned expenditures.
There are some planned expenditures on that for the remainder of the body camera match grant that I applied for and received.
Okay, that wasn't represented on the sheet that was provided. But that's good information. You know how much, you know how much that is?
Well, the total cost was about $107,000, and we got a cost match, or rather, excuse me, a grant match for 50% of $100,000, basically. So we have a $50,000, I think it's $49,000 and change, that is paid for by the grant, and then the remainder will have to be paid for, some out of the police equipment reserve fund. But that was discussed with the selectmen at the time. I don't remember. I don't have that grant paperwork in front of me.
So we don't have enough reserves to pay for the remainder of that.
Correct.
So where does the rest of it come from then?
We'll have to find a way.
I don't understand that. So we're in the middle of a budget cycle. We know we have expense coming at us of $50,000, and it's not identified anywhere.
Some of it will be able to come out of the operating budget if there's some money in there, but I guess I would defer to the board as well, the Board of Selectmen, because when the grant opportunity became available, I went to them with the breakdown of what it would cost, and here we are.
I can.
Yeah, Joe, go ahead.
So right now, there's $10,128 in the fund for that device, or that line, which was put in last year in 2022, and there's supposed to be $10,000 added in fiscal '23. So I expect to get checks from Lynn for the rest remaining of the fiscal '23 additions in the next 4 or 5 weeks or so.
I think we have 20 in there,
We have like,
if I'm not
you'll
mistaken.
have 20, like.
It was started in
February
fiscal year
1st.
'21,
Pardon?
That's right, yeah.
right?
There's 20
yeah.
in there now. We're targeting 5,000 more this year. So
Mm-hmm.
end of year '24, we'll have 25,000 in that account. And it sounds like the remaining bill is going to be 50,000.
Yes, 57.
Okay, so we have 25 of it covered. Where is the other 25 going to be?
So as the year goes on, we're still just in the 7th month of the current year. Lynn and Kim look very carefully at where we may be underspending budget amounts, and we will use some of the underspending to cover the difference, as we do every year with various accounts. As you know, when we're this time of year, we don't know what's going to happen 15 months out.
I may very well have it in my operating budget, too. We were down a police officer position for a few months, so it might flush out that in my own operating budget that we have enough.
So so thanks for all that. So that takes away that opportunity, so I'll take that off the table. And then the other one was account 364. Account 364 on the same page is vehicle maintenance. It's got
That's
14,000
Police
in it.
cruiser, new cruiser, 364.
No, it says PD vehicle maintenance.
Oh, sorry, yep.
And
The budgeted amount, chief, is 14,000.
Yeah. So I don't know whether this is planned maintenance or is it,
This is oil changes, tire rotations, anything else that a vehicle might need.
so this is an example. When we let's talk about it, going a little deeper, right? So,
If I may, Colin, excuse me,
please.
one moment.
Yeah.
So, but when I do this line item, I usually talk to the gentleman who works on our cars, the mechanic, and I ask him, and he knows our fleet better than most people. So I ask him if he thinks that 14,000 would be an adequate, appropriate amount, given what our current fleet health is, if you will. So that's how I came to that number as well, even though we have the 2 new Chargers in the fleet. Certainly, the cost of oil filters hasn't gone down, so. I'm sorry.
no, that's okay. Thank you. So this is just an example of town vehicle and equipment repair. I don't, when you read the warrant article for town equipment and vehicle repair, it doesn't portend of capital to me. So perhaps we can use this as a specific example of how that fund gets used.
If I go back to the original discussion, though, I would be hard-pressed to think of a oil filter or an oil change as a capital expense, right? Because this is a maintenance that's I would imagine there would be tens of expenses throughout the year for maintenance versus one or two, right?
There was
Based on what you said. So maybe there's a set of tires that's $2,000. You could debate on if that's capital or not, but oil changes are, $100.
Right, when these funds are created, we did not at that time envision oil changes, tire rotation, those kinds of things. The thought has been, if there's some big unexpected expense, engine blows, pump something on the fire truck once went, and that was very expensive, so it's big ticket items. We can have expendable trust accounts that could do these kinds of things. That's not been how we have operated. It could. I'm not entirely sure the value of such a thing because it's the same money, whether we put it in you still have to fund it, so it's still the same money. Those kinds of things would put additional work on the finance officer, which, she's here working, she can do the work, but I wonder what the benefit would be, to have the additional accounting to come out of another fund. I don't see it. I see this year what it would do. It definitely would lower the operating budget. It would be a one-time lowering of the operating budget, and it could be a way to lower capital reserve accounts that if you think it's too high. That's what it would do. But going forward, I don't know why you would take out these things out of the operating budget where people see it and know that these things are being done and have it. It's not really off the books, but it's sort of off as far as taxpayers. They don't see, when the selectmen are agents to expend, they don't see those things. So I see a one-time benefit this year, and as far as the chief is concerned, she would get her tires, oil changes, and all that stuff. But it wouldn't.
But there's still a question if it could actually be used for those types of
Right,
things,
and that's
right?
the trustee of trust funds.
Correct.
And whether he'd have to go to the AG's office or Secretary of State. Again, it is legal to have trust funds, reserve funds for this kind of thing. We set these up originally as capital reserve funds because way back in the day, we thought it would just be for capital.
So my own
Big, things that last more than a year.
So based on that question, my own clarity, even if we did vote to remove it, there's a chance that it couldn't be used.
Well, I think if the trustees said you're not going to get the money, that'd be one thing, and-
That's what I'm just saying.
Right, and while Joe is here, we don't, you can't make deals for what's going to happen in the future. We don't know who, any of you are going to be here as budget committee members, who the selectmen will be, who the trustees will be. So to say we're going to get a commitment,
Right.
to have the selectmen do X, Y, Z, I don't know what they're going to do.
Right.
We can't get we get a commitment from town meeting that year, but we can't say what they're going to do next year. So I get it. I understand what we're saying here. You would save money in the operating budget. That's clear. You would lower some capital reserves one time, but you'd have to, at some point, I think, fund it, right? At some point, these accounts would get so low, and we wouldn't have the money should an engine blow or
Correct.
things that we were actually thinking about. And again, I think we do have to have a conversation about capital reserves. I think we do have a wider conversation. We have been using them differently than I think they were originally intended.
So let's push this discussion forward. So that's potentially a proposal.
Can I just make one comment,
One
please?
comment, yeah, go ahead.
So listen, all I'm trying to do is look for opportunities where in a tough economic time, we go to the piggy bank once to help the taxpayer this year. I'm not suggesting that we make it a habit. I'm not suggesting that we redefine how we do things. I think the two conversations, what we do now in this budget and what we're going to do in the future, are mutually exclusive conversations, right? I agree that the select board should be having comprehensive conversations about a lot of things in this budget, and to your point, put them in writing, in policy, so future select boards need to follow them or change them with the appropriate votes, right? So I think that's a process question that needs to be dealt with, but that's just my comment for it.
Right, so if Joe is sitting here, if he thinks he would approve the expenditures, he's one of them, I don't know about the other two, it could be a one-time way to lower. There's no question about that. The only question really is it legal? Would they actually hand the money over?
But to put this to bed, I suspect that what I'm hearing Joe say is this particular item probably wouldn't pass.
Correct. Okay. Any other questions for Chief? So if not, what we have is a motion on the floor from John to remove the $70,000. I'm not going to add your 14 because that would be a different amendment potentially depending on the outcome of this. Or if you also agree with Colin on the removal of the 14.
I just talked about 70,000.
Okay, so he just wants the 70,000. So the first vote would be to reduce the operating budget by 70,000, zeroing out the vehicle.
Right.
So John made the motion. Any seconds? Colin seconds. All those in favor? 3 ayes. All those opposed? Okay, nays have it. Do you want to make an proposal to remove the 14,000 from that line item?
I think the 14,000 was already removed, Chief, right? The 14,000 you're referring to
On
is...
the pistols or the vehicle maintenance?
The vehicle maintenance is still in there.
Oh, no, I accept Joe's body language is telling me that I'm not.
Okay,
so I'm
all right, sorry, I just wanted to check to make sure. Okay, Joe.
So seeing no other requests for changes, except the battery, do we have any money in the budget for a battery? Okay.
It needs a line item.
I'll make a motion. Are we dealing with the final number of 1507104?
Yes.
I'll make a motion to accept that number, 1,507,104.
Any seconds? All those in favor? All those opposed? Ayes have it.
Next, we have Fire Department,
Yes.
$629,602.
Any discussions for fire? Joe has a motion to accept 629, 60, nope, sorry, hold on.
I'm sorry, I'm...
Nope, no worries.
My apologies.
Yep.
I'll go back to capital reserves. So if you look at account 430 and 364, hold on a minute. 364 is, I'll take vehicle repair off, my apologies.
Okay.
430
430,
is
equipment repair and maintenance?
equipment repair and maintenance for 10,500. So I wonder whether, if the chief can help us understand what that is and whether our ability to wrestle that money out of the reserve funds is worthwhile. So Chief, thank you for being here. Account 430, equipment repair and maintenance, 10,500.
So in that line item, we have things for small engines, including our air compressor, chainsaws, vent saws. We've got 4 portable generators, portable pump on tanker 1. Those accumulatively are $750. We service our extrication equipment every year in the amount of $2,500. An individual comes in and services the tools, portable pump, all the hydraulic lines. And that's our vehicle exhaust system. That also includes our vehicle exhaust system at $600. We flow test our packs every year on an annual basis as required by NFPA, 25 of those at $50. And so that's $1,250. Servicing our life pack, which is the defibrillator that's on the utility. That is listed at 14. It's gone up slightly, so we have to modify our budget there. We also fit test our firefighters for their SCBA mask, the self-contained breathing apparatus mask. 45 of those is $900. Forestry equipment's $2,000. And then servicing the air filling station, so on an annual basis to make sure that we've got non-contaminated air, that it's Class A rated, as well as changing out the filtration system, oil system on that is $900. So that it comes to $10,428 for that requested amount. I think is probably
$10,500.
Rounded up.
Thank you, Chief. So Joe, as you listen to the chief, what are your off-the-cuff thoughts on that?
Radio, you're actually buying a piece of equipment. If you're buying a piece of equipment, that probably would pass, okay? But if you want to repair some radios, probably not. And I don't know if we want to have a threshold. I mean, $750 or something like that, it's kind of...
Yeah, so interestingly enough, and I would say that it seems like 2 years ago, it was probably 8 years ago, all the department heads had to individually or look at our reserve accounts individually, and there was a 2-page vetting process. I believe Paul Gorman probably has that, or someone in the planning board, and so there were probably a series of 10 questions as far as what the purpose of the capital reserve account was. And we had to go through and individually vet each account. So that information's out there. It could certainly be, brought up. So for our radios, those are for our mobile radios that are in the apparatus, 110-watt radios, or the portable radios, which we issue to our fire officers, and as well as each piece of apparatus. So not every firefighter has a radio. The radio line item, so 366 is for repair. What happens is every firefighter has a pager, and so when that pager goes off, it trips and then gives the location of the emergency call. That's really what we're looking at, as well as some batteries for our portable radios, and that's 2,965. I probably rounded up on that one. And then with regards to radios, 613, typically we have to purchase 5 of those pagers on an annual basis, just because we have 45 firefighters. The technology changes, so we're not buying, each one of those is $490, so that was $2,450. And then for the individual fire officers, they're on call. Sometimes they use their personal vehicles. So we don't get one of the APAC, APCO 25 compliant radios. Those are right around $5,000. We buy a cheaper one that's analog, not analog and digital, and those are right around $700. So it's for one replacement radio, just because over a period of time, switching them out between various officers. And we have 10 fire officers, so it's basically a 10-year rotation. Sometimes they last longer, sometimes not.
Any other questions for equipment repair and maintenance? So do you want to, I guess I'm going to go back to Joe, because from what I heard from Chief, there were a lot of different small items in the equipment repair and maintenance line item for the $10,500. You said, you gave one example, but I guess going back to the police discussion, there were other things that I heard that were much smaller, parts of an engine, small things that were...
When we go to all in all, for, a chainsaw doesn't start, sometimes it's a filter, bad gas, carburetor adjustment. Those things are a lot of times in the, anywhere from $50 to $250, dollars.
So maybe going back to you on, I'm feeling like it's the same answer as police, but I want to clarify.
I don't know, I guess I'd have to look at it a little deeper, because it sounds like you got some stuff misclassified, what you call maintenance. You're buying new equipment.
Well, no, it's like repair, right? Like the chainsaw.
Yeah, so the chainsaw,
well, no,
like the
you talk about different
carburetor.
radios and stuff that people...
So not necessarily. So in The classification for 613, that was for radios. The radio equipment is also our pagers. That would be considered a radio equipment. Certainly, they could be reclassified into, new equipment or whatever the case is. And then the radio repair is actually reprogramming a current piece of equipment. Sometimes it's purchasing batteries for a current piece of equipment. So could we reclassify? Absolutely. But
Okay, I guess I have a question for the Budget Committee in general, and now as my citizen's hat. How much savings will move a penny off the tax rate?
That's a Lynn question.
I mean, you're striving to lower the tax rate, but I can't imagine a couple $1,000s is going to change the tax rate, maybe at the 5th decimal place, but.
Yeah, it's about 1/8 of a penny.
So any given item, unless it's huge, Joe, is small, the question is the aggregate, right? So
Yeah.
I think
Yeah,
that's
but does our software calculate out to 5 digits when the tax rate is calculated, or is it rounded somehow?
I think it goes up.
I don't know if you're saving enough money to affect the general fund tax rate. You're robbing for 1 year, you're robbing the capital funds for a 1-year temporary fix. And then the next year, who's everyone sitting here for the 9 of you, is going to be faced with kind of a makeup year.
No.
sure.
I disagree with that completely. You're buying a year. A year from now, your car might be a little old, but you don't have to make up the price for it in that next year. You can make it up over a period of time, but you've just bought 1 year of time to get us through what is a very difficult time right now. So I don't think you always have to see that we have to make it up the next year.
Well, I kind of disagree that this is a 1-year difficult time. I think the difficult time is going to be on for the next couple of years.
So Lindsay, wait, make a point. Yeah, you want to make a point?
It's really quick.
Yep.
Did we ever land on the legality of the whole?
Correct. That's what I guess to go back
Okay.
to Joe, based on that one line item, equipment repair and maintenance, and I'm going to use chiefs, so if I'm wrong, if it's fixing a chainsaw, which might cost, correct, that's what I thought. Okay. So Colin, based on that answer,
So I'll withdraw it.
withdraw it.
But I want to go to the place that we sort of been mixing a couple of topics here.
Okay.
Can I just answer the question about how much it cost? The change that Kim and Lynn made on the tax calculation sheet increased the tax rate by 26 cents for 400 and some odd $1,000 of additional appropriations. So somebody wants to divide the 20.
I can. It's $12,500.
There you
We'll
go.
move it by a penny.
There you go. $12,500 gives you a penny.
Get a penny. Okay. So any other questions on fire for the 629, 602?
I do.
If you are withdrawing, so you have another one.
Yeah, I do, yes.
Okay.
Again, back to capital reserves. Chief, you have 2 line items, account 366 and 613, that refers to radios.
Yes, sir.
And I believe, if I'm right, we're going to spend $64,000 for new radios.
Yes,
in
sir.
2024. So,
Well, maybe, it all contingent, yeah. Okay.
I mean, it's currently proposed.
Yes.
Right? Am I right? So, if we're buying new radios, why do
Yep.
we need those 2 lines?
So the 613 deals with pagers. So on an annual basis, we have 5 pagers that we purchase at,
Okay.
I believe it was $490.
So it's pages, it's not the radio.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's a different piece of equipment.
Okay. That's interesting.
And my apologies, I don't have a pager on me, but I do have my portable. So it would be this type of portable that we're proposing for replacing on the various pieces of apparatus.
That's the 64,000.
That's the 64.
Okay.
Yep.
And then the other item that says radio repair, is that pages repair?
That's typically pagers.
Okay. So
But
radios
also
along with
some portable batteries.
Yeah, okay.
So with every portable, we also have batteries that on they last probably 3 to 4 years. Some of them are older, but if anyone knows electronics, the more you charge them, the less they last, unfortunately, from a, yeah.
I'm fine. Thank you for the time.
Okay.
I want to, yeah, and not to simplify things for Joe, but as the saying goes, sometimes the squeeze isn't worth the juice. So, you know, it's that balancing act of what is, what we gain today from what we're looking at for tomorrow.
All right, so hearing no other discussions on proposals and no amendments to change the line item, or sorry, the budget, is there a motion to move the 629-602? Any seconds? Second. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Ayes have it.
Okay, we have Firewards, $292.
Joe moved it. Any seconds? Second. Lou seconded. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Emergency Management, $16,550.
Any discussions? Seeing none, any proposals? I can move it? Okay. I make a motion to move $16,550. Any seconds? Joe seconds. All those in favor? Aye. All right. Abstention. One abstention.
Dispatch, $537,829.
Discussion? Two discussions. Colin, you want to go first?
I'll yield the floor to my colleague, and then I'll come after.
Okay, John.
I've mentioned this before, the item, the $24,500 for equipment repair and maintenance. My understanding, this is for a lot of things up on the mountain, such as batteries and things like that. And I still believe that the fund that we set up, I think back probably 2014, 2015, was to replace radios and associated equipment over a period of time. And I think that that should come from the capital reserve account.
Let me get that amount, because here we are.
Sorry about jumping on you there, honey.
So there's a portion of it, not all of it, will be for a Mount Kearsarge battery upgrade to add a second cabinet to store the batteries, as the current one will not accommodate the newer batteries. So that's a big portion of it. So it's to replace the batteries and install a new cabinet for that on Mount Kearsarge.
Any questions for Chief on that? Colin?
In a similar fashion, if I add on to John's, I think the communications equipment reserve account, I wonder whether the line item 366 and 614, 366 is radio repair for $2,500, and 614 is dispatch new equipment for $5,000, whether that can come out of the reserve account as well. It's for all the communities, I assume, right?
I'm sorry.
It's for those three lines. John's line and the two lines I identified are for the dispatch center equipment, whether it's repair or new equipment or what have you, right?
Yep.
So why wouldn't we use the reserve account called communications equipment, which was created for the dispatch center, to fund those items?
Well, do you want to just talk about equipment repair and maintenance? Are you still in the same line item?
I added two other line items to John's question.
So I think we'll go back to the equipment repair and maintenance. Colin's saying in the line item above that for radio repair, which is $2,500.
Yep.
And 3 below that for $5,000, which is new equipment.
New equipment, that's for some of the equipment in the dispatch center itself. There's a big round credenza where they store all of their binders and things all their reference material. So new equipment might be their dispatch chairs that they sit in as well. So that's not necessarily like radio equipment, communications equipment, which is my understanding of what the capital reserve fund is for. So I wouldn't propose to put new equipment anything that we would spend out of new equipment, take that out of the communications capital reserve fund, because that's more for the dispatch consoles, if the radio equipment goes down, if an antenna gets struck by lightning, that kind of thing.
Any discussions? So do we want to go back, John, to you?
It's your original.
It is more than just that, I believe, too, because when we figured it out, we were figuring out radio replacement over periods of time, and I think the battery packs and so forth over a period of time were also included in those figures.
Yep, but I'm talking more, I guess I want to make sure we attack one of these at a time. So let's finish on the new equipment, dispatch new equipment. I don't know that chairs for the dispatch center are capital expenditures.
Yeah, no, okay, I'm not going to argue that one.
Okay, I got one. I'm just kidding. Do you
Okay.
want to go back then to,
So why don't we go back, unless there's no further discussion on those two, do you want to make an amendment to the budget to reduce by the 24.5?
no. Let's not do that, because that includes our service contract, our AvTech software. So what I will do now is I'll add up the cost of the Kearsarge battery upgrade and take that away from the 24,000, because I still need some money in there for equipment repair and maintenance, if you want to just take out this battery upgrade. Is that what you're getting at, or you want to take the whole thing away?
I think that sounds fair, what she's saying.
I don't understand why we couldn't use the communications equipment reserve for all of that line item. It's for the dispatch center. It's for communications equipment in the dispatch center, right? Am I misunderstanding your comment?
I think, though, it goes back to the discussion of the size of the items. There are small items, there are larger items. Some might be under a couple $100s.
And some of them are maintenance and rental agreements. I don't think those are capital expenditures.
Correct, right, I would agree with that.
Well, okay, I mean, that's fine. I guess I would ask that, if I were a lawyer and we wanted to debate this issue, we'd go down to the words that were agreed to by the town, and unless it said capital, then you can make any inference you want. But the point is, I'm just trying to make sure that we take an opportunity. There's a lot of money in the communications equipment reserve account.
If you want to make a motion to reduce those, we can definitely do that, okay? I think we're just offering right now opinions on, again, we don't have a definition of capital.
Right.
So, but if we want to, first we'll start with John, and then we'll go to you to make a motion.
Fair enough.
For the line items.
Is anybody working on that number already?
Yeah, I think so.
Sorry, I can only do so many things.
That's it. And Will, I'm about to run out of batteries according to this red light on the... I could, yeah. I can...
So it looks like the towers. Yes, okay, minus 380. 65. So the cost for this Kearsarge battery upgrade is $7,500. $7,500.
And that's the only, well... The rest of that, you said, was contracts and things like that?
Contracts, service and maintenance contracts, rental of the space on Mount Kearsarge, and I also added, so the cost of the rental for the space on Mount Kearsarge Tower is $1,000. I did put another $1,000 in there, anticipating renting space on Mount Sunapee for Phase 3 of the communications project. It's not up there yet, but I anticipate it being there by the time this budget is in place.
So I recommend reducing that number, 24,500 by $7,500.
So 17,000.
To, yeah, 17,500, yeah.
Any,
17,000, yeah.
Any seconds to that proposal?
I'll second it. You were good with that, Chief?
Yep,
All right, I'll second it.
as long as that is in agreement that that is a capital expenditure, and we would be able to use it from the Communications Capital Reserve Fund.
I would have to,
Because we need that to occur this year.
Please be aware, Joe, you're being filmed here, so, just so you know.
okay. So the motion is to reduce that line item to 17,000, and we have a motion and a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? What do we got? 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 opposed? 5?
I'm in favor. I was in favor.
Okay, so we have 5 opposed, so that fails. Okay. Colin, do you want to make a proposal?
I don't think it's worth the time.
Okay, all right.
Some of the items that Colin has proposed to take stuff out of the capital reserve funds are, actually very prudent and very, very good. I think somehow, and I get the feeling, we're a little bit out of sync, because in order for this to be seamless, somehow that I think that, Joe and his committee should have been involved in this before. So that's my consternation. I do believe that these things are valid, but I think would you seem to be a little bit out of sync with each other, with the different parts of the town?
Yeah, noted, and it sounds like this is something that the selectmen will be taking up after town meeting, so I think more to come next year on what can happen. Okay. So, do we have a motion for the 537-829?
So moved.
Any seconds? Second. All those in favor? Ayes have it. We're almost there, folks. We're halfway, or actually less than halfway, but let's do it. Let's do it.
You ready?
Yeah.
Highway Administration, $1,082,168.
Discussions?
I'll make a motion to accept that number.
So moved, a second?
All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Highways and Streets, $578,600.
Discussion. Colin?
Thank you. Bob's here. I just wanted $80,000 for account 3, sorry, hold on a minute.
430?
Yeah, thank you, 430.
No, 430.
Equipment repairs and maintenance.
Yeah, that's, so just in a nutshell, is that a bunch of little things, or is there anything major there that might be characterized as capital reserve possible?
Pretty much in the same boat as Jay. It can go from as simple as a battery to a cordless drill to oil filters for lawnmowers, weed whackers that need repairs, chainsaws. The list starts very, very small items and goes all the way up to the plow trucks that we run daily. It could be cutting edges, bolts for the cutting edges to bolt them back on. The list goes on and on. I have a pretty extensive list. I'm not even going to go into all of it, but it's pretty detailed.
But nothing of significant value, like engine or compressors that need to be replaced that are equipment related?
No, not at this. If that comes about, usually I try to figure out a way to absorb it within the budget as much as possible. But we do maintenance on the air compressors. We have actually 3 of them at our facility. 2 large ones to do work on the trucks. 1 is for the sprinkler system. That was just replaced recently. That would fall under buildings anyway. But I don't see anything happening with stuff like that. This is just general repairs on keeping equipment running.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm all set, Chris.
Any other discussions? Any motions?
I move that we accept the 800.
Well, 578.
578, 800.
600.
600.
Any seconds? Lindsay seconds. All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Sorry, street lighting, $10,000.
Make a motion to accept the $10,000.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Transfer station, $491,333.
Discussions?
Make a motion to accept the $491,333.
I'll second that. All those in favor? Okay.
Solid waste, $17,500. This is the landfill monitoring and the special waste drives.
Move the question.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Health administration, $6,344.
I'll make a motion.
Okay.
All those in favor?
Health agencies, $249,769.
Any discussions?
So moved.
Any seconds? Lindsay seconds. All those in favor? Aye.
Welfare administration, $5,474.
I do have a question. With the demise of the, the state funding that was based on federal funding and, for homeless and not homeless, but people will that create an additional
It
expense to the
potentially could.
community?
Celeste is the welfare officer, and she feels that the $16,000 she has had is adequate for now, but it could.
Okay.
If the homeless issue or heats up and is more, it could. So you could consider increasing the $16,000, but Celeste has not asked for an increase.
Okay.
And yeah, Joe would like to make a motion for the next three items, health and welfare.
5474, government, cap for 6,000, and welfare vendor payments for 16.
Any disagreements or concerns?
Second.
Okay, so we're combining all three.
Okay.
Okay, one motion for the three. All those in favor? All right, great.
Okay.
Feel free to continue to do that. All right,
Next up,
recreation.
Recreation, $221,113.
Any discussions?
Yes, please.
Bill?
I will abstain from this vote because the selectmen have not had an opportunity to discuss it yet.
Okay. And that's due to the special events?
That's due to the special event edition, yes.
Correct. So just as a reminder, and I know Melissa, for you and Hannah, weren't here last, or maybe it was last meeting, there was a proposal to increase the budget by $11,966 to help pay for Halloween. That would cover the costs of police, fire, closing the road, toilets, additional costs to run that event for Halloween. Any discussions on rec? Colin? Oh, sorry, Joe. One of you, go ahead.
Welcome to the process. I don't think the request was for 11,000. My recollection was 9,900 and something for us to man this, or at least allocate funds for Halloween. Was that the number?
That was the initial number that was presented in the draft proposal, yeah, $9,960.
Okay.
So is there a reason that it's 11?
Well, there's other stuff in that.
It was already 2,000.
There's already other.
Okay, all right, sorry. Yeah.
So that line is
That's inclusive of that.
special events, and so there's other things on top of that.
Yep.
And I guess this is just my thoughts. I'd like to discuss this. Lindsay actually pointed it out when we had the conversation. Selectmen haven't weighed in. If that $9,600 is sort of earmarked for our own departments, police, fire, et cetera, my feeling is let's let that play out for a year and let it get absorbed in their regular personnel budgets. and not just increase that line item for that one. And I can't think of other things. I know we're talking about this as a town-sponsored event, and it's not hospital days. It's not an event, whether it's a political campaign where we have to have a couple of extra cops. There's all kinds of things that go on through the course of the year that I would sense that the chief has kind of accounted for that. And we've done a good job actually of special duty stuff, billing it back to Eversource or all those other people with the revolving fund. But I'm just of the mind that this is a fairly new way to approach it, and we shouldn't have the $9,600 in a recreation budget. I think it should be in the other budgets, is where it should fall, and accounted for in those other budgets.
So I'm going to put my rec commission hat on. So the challenge with that would be that's not included in the police or fire budget as part of their overtime or whatever the line item is. So the risk is that that would not get funded, which would mean that we can't close Main Street down and we wouldn't have fire or police potentially. I'm not saying it definitely would mean that, but I'm saying that, at least for now, that's not proposed in their line items.
So I would suggest to you that since this is not the first year that we're doing it, that it's gone on for several years, it's embedded in their line items. They've covered those costs over the years. It's there, and it's in their run rate.
I would ask both Chief Lyon and Chief Cobb to comment to that.
They can comment. All I'm saying is that they can comment negative if they want. And if we want to do a line item by line item, it's in their run rate. They paid for it this year. They paid for it last year. It's there.
They didn't pay for it the year before because it wasn't there.
Okay, so pre-COVID, when we did Halloween, it was there. My only point is, it's in the run rate. They've been supporting it for several years. And if we want to give it to the Recreation Department, we should take money out of their budgets.
Chief, do you want to comment?
Sure. So it started to get shut down several years ago, and it has been more and more difficult to staff as years have gone on. So this would be at a detail rate for people to get in, because it is that difficult to get people to come in and work an event like this, either at their overtime rate. So again, this was the proposal at the outset, and I think if the town wants to support an event of this magnitude, again, there were 3,000 people in a really small area on Main Street. A lot of you were there. So this was a proposal that we came up with, and it would be for a detail rate. I think when you have that many people, it's incumbent upon the town to compensate the employees for that type of an event and to plan accordingly, to have chemical toilets if you want them, to have an EMS station on standby. So this was one of the proposals. We have absorbed it in our budget in the past at overtime rates, but we also haven't had hospital days for a couple of years as well. So this was the proposal that we came up with very initially.
And I will say, I remember when Ed Anderson came to me and talked about this, because this closing the street started in 2015. It was a few offices. It wasn't that much. This is huge.
Right.
I was on Main Street for this past one. It was much bigger than it was in the start. So I do think it was absorbed for several years in the budget, but it wasn't a big deal. There were a couple of officers. I don't know how many you had, but we probably could have used more. From what I saw of the people on the street, it seems like it's getting bigger, kind of like the Keene Pumpkin Festival. All of a sudden, there's like thousands of people.
We did have
It was a little thing to begin with.
We expanded the road closure this year because it wasn't safe having it closed off where we initially did, which required us to put more people at more intersections. So it's a great event, but it just requires a lot of logistics, a lot of planning, and a lot of manpower.
I'd also say that money that was allocated is not just for the salaries for that time. There are the toilets, there are other things, safety equipment, that's part of that line item, so it's not just allocated to fund the police and fire for that event. Other discussions?
I just wanted to clarify when I kind of asked that pointed question of how other events work. absorbed was the word I used. It wasn't, it was more of an accounting, not a, you know, not in difference to the event or how it's funded. I know it has to be done. I was just more kind of thinking that if we had special event detail, then we need that line item. And that was my only point. And it was basically made to kind of, it's deep-seated in me to defend and fight for every penny for the Recreation Department too. So, I mean, I just want to make sure 10 grand wasn't going to be an annual fee that was going to be lopped onto the Recreation Department's budget. And so that was my point in making that observation. I just think accounting-wise, it could be better dealt with. That's it.
I think the plus of having it in the rec is it makes it transparent. This is a rec program. You know, it's going to be paid. It's all town money, to your point.
Yeah.
It's going to be paid for sure. The plus is it is a recreation event.
And I would, again, I'm going to put my rec hat on for the other budget committee members. We will be coming to the selectmen in March to present the plan for the year, not for '24, but I can imagine in the future we'll have other events that might require similar things. The revolving fund that we do have is very low and will continue to decrease. So maybe over time, that could come out of the revolving fund. But for now, we're asking for this to come out of the rec fund, or to be added to the rec fund. Joe?
And to be clear, I am absolutely in favor of this event. I mean, I wish it was there when my kids were younger. And now that they're gone, and, you know, I'll be glad to be deputized for the evening and put on my orange vest and handle intersection. Jerry Coogan will too. You know, our kids are long gone. So we'll do it. So in no way do I want this to, you know, appear as if I'm opposed to this. My feeling is, you know, in an effort going forward, because there could be other events that, you know, will require police, it will require fire. So we have to figure out a way going forward, accounting-wise, so it falls in the right budget is all I'm talking about. And that was what I was advocating, move it on. And for this year, as Chief has said, if we overspend a certain line item, we find it somewhere, and then we figure it out and we account for it next year. But if that's not the way you want to handle it, I'm not going to worry too much about what pocket it comes out of. I just felt like Lindsay felt that it should be accounted for coming out of the right departments.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
And just from a clarity standpoint, as this event has grown, the chief and I had some concerns, and so initially there was a discussion, especially after COVID, of this might be the proper time to not have Main Street closed down. It's a state road. The complexity of businesses and working with individuals on Main Street is complicated, and so initially we were not going to close down Main Street. So from a budgetary standpoint, we were trying to reduce or at least level out any sort of expenditures. This year, we were able to absorb that so far into our operating budget. I figure it's going to be right around this event itself is 4% of the total operating budget for the firefighters at a time and a half compensation. And we need a minimum of 20 to 24 firefighters. With communications equipment, with staffing apparatus, we have 2,000, 2,500, 3,000 people on Main Street. The complexity of response is increased. And so staffing the engine and the ladder company, if people can't drive down Main Street, our firefighters can't get to the station if there's a call. So those are some of the complexities that with PUT and the rec department, police department, we looked at. So in the past, the fire department was not involved other than handing out candy. So that was what the Firefighters Association did, was we hung out and handed out candy. This is a little bit different as the magnitudes grow.
Okay, so let's move on. So do you want to make a proposal?
No. I'm comfortable with making a motion to pass the budget as printed as 221-113.
Any seconds? Second. All those in favor? Ayes have it.
You ready? Abstain for bill, no bill. Okay. Library, $635,338.
Discussions?
I'll second that.
All those in favor? Aye. There are multiples that we can do here?
Yes.
We have patriotic purposes.
Any questions
archives.
on, how about this? Any questions on patriotic purposes, culture and rec, or general government, conservation administration? Stop me if you have a question as I go forward. Energy committee. What is that? Other conservation. And
Stop there.
we'll stop there, yeah. So we'll stop at other conservation. So
I'll make a motion to accept the amounts as printed to the Budget Committee in the total amount for each department.
all those in favor? Is that okay, Kim, that we do it? Okay, just want to make sure. I'm on video here. Okay, move on to housing. We have Housing Commission.
Yeah, 16,302.
I'll make a motion to accept that amount as printed.
All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Debt service principal, $409,025.
Go ahead and move it.
Yep. Joe moved it, I'll second. All those in favor? Ayes have it.
Debt service interest, $143,398.
Any motion? Any seconds?
Melissa?
Melissa seconds. All those in favor? Aye. All right.
Okay, moving down on to transfers to capital reserves, $471,500.
Any discussions? Transfer to capital reserves. Do you have anything? We are transfer to capital reserves, 471.
Yeah, we skipped the outlays.
No, that comes next.
Skip the page, didn't we?
That will come next in
Because
your.
we're still talking about the money
Operating.
that goes towards the tax rate.
Okay,
Yep.
okay.
So actually, that 471 is on page 19 at the bottom.
Right. Under transfers to capital reserves on 19, everyone there?
471,500.
Any discussions?
Yeah.
John?
Under 4915-100-905, computer maintenance and replacement, there's $66,000 in the account. I suggest that we cut the appropriation by $12,000 more.
Any discussions or questions?
What's the rationale?
I think the rationale is something that I think has escaped us this evening, is that we're in tough times and we haven't really begun to experience it like we're going to. That this inflationary thing is still going on. We are dealing with prices that we have no idea what they're going to be like in the future. The consumer debt, because people haven't wanted to give up the way they want to live, is increasing rapidly, and I think it's up to us to take a breather for a year and to understand where we're going, what we're trying to move forward to here. With the economy going the way it is, we don't have the sustainability for doing this. And I'm sort of dismayed at the approach we're taking here tonight.
Any thoughts or comments from other members?
Just a question, so I can ensure if we're going to go through some of these that we're all on the same page. I'm looking at a printout, I don't know who has it handy, with what our current reserve balances are and then projected. So will that, is this the 1997 computer maintenance and replacement fund that we're, and so currently we're at a balance of 66,558, sounding right? Okay. And that's, so if we don't fund it, we're at that level. I'm not sure, when have we pulled from that account?
We're going to pull 3,500 this year for...
3,500.
Right, for the police computer.
It would seem like this fund, you know, is one that we do have to look at also. And again, this is a project the selectmen have already said they're going to have with the trustees. Some of these computer funds, we're finding these maintenance contracts are really falling into operating budgets. It seems like, you know, I'd almost yield to Mike, if you've got some thoughts on this, on that fund. I'd like to hear him.
You can come up and share.
I'd like to hear him.
Make sure the mic's on and state your name.
There, is it on? Yeah, Michael Williams, and I'm also the Information Technology Officer for the town. That reserve account has been added to at least the last 2 years, maybe 3, with an eye towards replacing obsolete equipment. We have servers at both the town office and the police department that are at least 6 years old, which is their expected life. And I estimated the replacement cost of that equipment is probably in the order of $170,000. There may be some opportunities to change the way we do computing. Cloud services are an opportunity that was not available 6 years ago, but it's going to change the nature of the expense. I believe that is a non-capital reserve account. Is that right, Joe?
Well, can't ask me.
Okay.
Ask that, Joe.
In any case, there's a good chance that we're going to change that from an operating expense, from a capital expense. But there's a lot of work that has to be done to design that new environment, which has not been approved or even approached.
Is that new environment moving things into the cloud? Is that what we're...
But that's an opportunity, potentially. I mean, technology is there that wasn't available 6 years ago.
Right.
But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to investigate whether or not that is a real opportunity. But in any case, there's going to be a significant computing expense on the near horizon. And rather than bite that $100,000 plus expense in 1 year, I recommend that we contribute on the order of $20,000 to that account to get it caught up, and which we've done, and that's why the balance is what it is.
And now it's at 12,000. That's the proposal.
That's the proposed contribution this year. Yeah.
Current, yeah. But you would actually like it.
I think it's half what it was.
You would like it to be higher.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Any other discussions? So John, back to you. Do you want?
I'm sorry, I have a question for Mike.
Yeah, go ahead, Colin.
Like and you may not know, what is your thoughts as to when you might have a plan in place that shows how much money we need out of the capital reserves for this, and/or when we might flip that switch? With the studying you have to do, is it a year? Is it 2 years? What's your sense?
I'd say I've had limited availability for the last 6-8 months.
Yeah.
So hopefully in the next year and a half, I'd be able to put some time into myself, or we can find somebody else, but I'm cheaper than most of the other people with the same skill set.
And that's also at the time that you would consider moving some of the town activities to the
Right, but if we don't go ahead and make that plan and do those changes, then we're, very easily could have, a server fail and have to replace it today.
Most certainly.
And we just have to do it.
I'm finding out that some of the licensing nowadays, they make it hard for you to buy stuff, and they actually pushing you to the cloud.
There's all kinds of caveats.
Yeah. Any other, Colin, does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay. So John, back to you. Do you want to make a motion to reduce that by 12,000?
No.
Okay. So any other discussions on capital reserves? Any motions to move forward with the 471,500? Lindsay made a motion.
Is John done?
Yeah.
Or just with that one line item?
Are you done overall with capital reserves?
I've got
You got lots.
8 more things here.
Okay. John's got 8 more things. So we will pause on any votes to see what other items we might have.
Take them line-
Do you want to take them line by line?
Sure. Well, I have line 4915, 100, 906, town vehicle and repair, and I would suggest, there's almost $30,000 on that account. I would suggest reducing the contribution to that this year, $5,000.
John, is that 906 or 906-1?
906-01, thank you, Joe.
Okay.
Oh, no, yeah,
Yeah,
that's correct, yep,
5,000.
yep, yep.
Any discussions on that? What's the next one?
Next one is Highway Department, 4915, 100, 908. There's just under $1 million in the account, and I would suggest reducing that for this year by $130,000.
So taking out the full 130?
Yep.
Okay. Any discussions on that?
I would just bring people's attention to, I don't know what it's called, but it's the summary sheet that was provided by probably you, Lynn. It's capital reserve fund projections, and it lays out all the reserves and what's going on this year and the future years. And I think that if you take a look at the highway department and you remove that money, I think we should just make sure we do the math. There's a projection of expenses in the following years that if you remove that money, you may go into a deficit. Now, I don't know how accurate the 2025 expenditures are in that category. We're talking in 2025, $340,000 for a dump truck, or maybe it's the...
Right.
And then we have another refuse trailer for $87,000, Ford tractor for $240,000, and a road grader for $238,000. So I don't know whether those are hard costs that we're going to incur in 2025, or if they can be spread out. Then I would agree, John, with you that we could reduce to 130, because at this point, by the end of this year, at least according to this piece of paper, if it's correct, by the end of 2024, with that 130,000 put in, we're at 649,000, and the following year, with all those expenses, we're down to 83,000. So I don't know whether, Bob, you can comment on how hard, fast those expenditures are, or do you know what page I'm looking at? You want this?
Can you see where he's looking?
Yeah.
I'm looking at the categories.
Yeah.
I don't know how you can do these separate.
Are they going to be really next, are they going to be 2025 expenses?
That's how you want to do it. You can either make a
Spread out over
proposal for
a
doing
few more
separately,
years.
or you can do them all together.
Well, I mean, it seems like some might go, some might.
I mean, that page is a forecast of capital outlays over the next 3 or 4 years, so that's probably the kind of item we want to be thinking about.
The dump trucks are the frontline plow trucks. As we're replacing them, they're right around 12 years old, which John remembers that got changed a while back to stretch them out. Most manufacturers now recommend about 7 years. I'm fine with the 12. Going beyond that might be a little bit of a hurdle. We're finding that the plow frames are starting to show holes of wear where the pins go in, and we've actually had wings fall off, which isn't the greatest scenario. Nobody's gotten hurt or anything, so that's a good thing. But we're looking at probably, we're trying to get another truck. That's my recommendation for this year, and we'd probably be looking at 2 more. We're going to be auctioning off one of the older trucks come spring. So that will be revenue going back. We don't trade them in. As far as, let's see, we've got a 1-ton, well, we call it a 1-ton. It's the F550, which is actually a little heavier duty than that. One of those we're looking at probably due next year. And what we do there, I tried to stretch them out to the point where I don't dare go much more. What we're trying to do is get 5 years between them. And we take the oldest truck, move it to the transfer station, so they essentially get a vehicle. By the time they get rid of it, it's 15 years old, which is pretty outstanding for a 550 to make it that long. That's its retirement life, pretty much. It's easy on it over there. As far as the road grader, we've been slowly pushing that back. At some point, we probably will have to replace that. Right now, we don't use it as much with the gravel road program. We do use it for wing and back roads if we get a lot of snow, which obviously isn't the case right now. We have used it for scratching ice out of the roads along with grading them. We have used it for ditching before, but I feel very comfortable at this point hanging on to it. Eventually, it's going to come to a point where we can't get parts for it. I'm hoping that's a ways down the road. Did that answer pretty much your questions?
Thank you, Bob. So I think, if I can summarize, if I heard Bob correctly, the road grader is scheduled for $242,000 next year. That could be pushed off, so John, your cut would not negatively impact the end of the year. So I just thought that detail was important.
So John, do you want to make, I guess in just talking to John and looking at his list, we can certainly talk about each one, or what we could do is go through each of the capital reserve line items and vote. Do you want to talk about what you have in front of you? We could sit here for a long time and literally go through each one and have discussions, or we could go through your overall proposal, which is reducing many of the line items except for one by reducing them all to zero, except to one you'd reduce to half. So do you want to talk to that?
I guess I suggest we do each one. By the time we decide how best to do it all together, we could have a lot of them done. I think the town vehicle one, I make a motion that we reduce that by $5,000.
So let's go back to town vehicle and equipment repair. So that is 90601, that is at 5,000. So John's proposal is to remove that 5,000. Are there any seconds?
I'll second it just to move the conversation.
We have a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? All right, that fails. Fire department radio, no, you don't have a proposal for that. No, you don't. Okay. So let's go to the 130, which is highway equipment replacement. So right now, your proposal is to reduce that by $130,000. That's correct. Is there a second for that?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, so that will stay. Communications equipment, $17,000. Your proposal is to remove that to zero?
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay. Any seconds on that?
I'll second it.
All right. All those in favor?
Could we point out that there's almost $250,000 in that account already?
You should give him the mic.
Before we vote on that, I'd just like to point out that there's $240,000 in that account presently right now. This is again talking about the dispatch equipment thing that we make a contribution of $34,000 each year to. So.
Any comments or questions for John, or for those who actually own the line item? Chief.
I would also point out that this would fund the most critical piece of emergency communications equipment for not only the town of New London, but a lot of other communities too, if it were to go down, and it's quite expensive. So it's one of the most critical pieces of equipment that we can fund.
All right. Do you still want to make that amendment?
Yep.
Okay. So on the floor is to remove the 17,000. Any seconds? We have a second. All those in favor? All those opposed? That fails. Okay. Town building and maintenance, 100,000. John's proposal is to reduce that by half. Do you want to talk to that?
Yep. I think a good part of that was to do the roof for the Academy building, and I think the Public Works Director pointed out that that could be held off for at least a year. It wasn't an extreme problem, and so I propose cutting that $100,000 appropriation in half to $50,000.
Any,
Second that.
Bob, anything for that? Any thoughts or comments?
The only thing I would add is that currently, we're supposed to replace the generator here, which is last year's, Bob recommended it for $50,000. I mean, we used to try and keep that account fairly decently high, so I think John's suggesting 50. It's almost zero now. We've used it for many things. What's that, John?
7,500 in it right now.
Yeah,
So
it's
that's
almost
it.
zero. That's pretty
Okay.
close. That's about as low as since I've been here. It's low.
Okay.
And so we have the generator issue. We can put off the roof. It's been historically used for sort of, again, unexpected things. I mean, I don't have a huge problem to cut it to 50,000, but understand that if we need to replace this generator or any other generator, or we spring a leak in the Academy building that we weren't expecting, we also have the $1,500 for the fire department carpet and air conditioning that you already approved, or at least just, I think, were favorable to. So there are some things that are going to come out of it, so that's all I would say.
So, are you comfortable, Lynn, if nothing happens to this account, we end up with 25,000 and we're fixing the Academy building roof? Or are you suggesting that we don't do the Academy building roof and we have, whatever, 82 plus 25?
Yeah, we wouldn't have the money for the Academy building roof.
No, if we kept the 100,000 in.
Oh, kept the 100.
Right.
Bob is saying he thinks it can be delayed a year. Right, Bob? Right, so in
So there's-
fiscal year 2024, we don't have to replace the Academy roof.
So that capital outlay has already been eliminated in the budget?
It's not in there.
It's not in the budget.
Yeah.
Okay.
We don't put if there are expenditures for the town buildings capital reserve fund, it doesn't show up in your budget because it doesn't show up at town meeting. That's why you don't ever see it here. We talk about it like right now because you folks have to know how much you want to put into the account. And the only way you'll know that is if you know what expenditures we believe we're going to ask the selectmen to expend.
I'd like to just add that these generators you talked about, it's actually 3 generators, and after 98, these were put into place, so that just gives you an idea how old they are. So, something to keep in mind.
All right, so the proposal is to reduce the 100,000 to 50,000. Is there any seconds?
I'll second it for purpose of voting, yeah.
Okay. All those in favor? All those opposed? That fails. All right. Do you want to go down through the other ones?
I'll skip this one, but let's go to the Fort, I guess.
Tracy Memorial Library improvements? Okay.
This is for the library, 4915100918. There's $104,000 in the account right now, and we're looking to do flooring and kitchen and baths there. And I suggest that they hold off on this for a bit, and then we reduce the appropriation by $37,500.
Crystal?
Thank you. I was just looking over our current numbers and also wanted to raise attention to some additional projects that we are aware of now that were not at the time of our proposal. So, yes, it is true that currently we have around $107,000 in the account after this year's roof repair, and that's my tracking estimate. It might be slightly off from that. And we also did have some other exterior planned for this year. One thing that we are now aware of is that our walkway is creating safety issues, and we need to get a quote for that repair. Outside the building, there are a number of tripping hazards, and I have no idea how much that will cost until we get that evaluated this spring. Another is that we have a very old irrigation system in our back portion of the library and garden that is going to need to be evaluated and repaired and added to in order to keep the grounds in good condition. As to the flooring, kitchens and baths, and interior painting that are listed on our plan for the next 10 years, I just want to note that those have been deferred for many years, and I think that the taxpayers, the residents of New London, really care about the library, and if you've visited the library lately, you know that the paint and quite a bit of the flooring is in very poor condition. Also, our kitchen and bath fixtures, as well as the appliances in our kitchens, are very old and are starting to fail. I was just looking at the microwave that we have for heating up our lunches and wonder when that's going to go away. So, you know, we have 14 staff that spend a lot of their time working at the library, and I think it's important to keep that sort of thing in mind as well. Continuing to defer those projects will continue to increase the repair cost of those. And then the other large expenditures in the next 3 to 5 years that are very critical is continued work on our roof. In today's or in last year's dollars estimated to be $300,000, and we know that that is going to continue to go up in cost. We will continue to hold off on major repairs for as long as possible, but the longer we hold off on repairs and replacement of roof, the greater damage that's potentially caused inside of the building. So part of continuing to increase our original ask for this year was $75,000 to add to the fund to save towards that expense. And I know that was cut, and we said that that would be acceptable because we don't need all of those funds right away. But just looking at where we might be if we took out the $35,000 and proceeded with some repairs in the next fiscal year would put us almost at nothing in that account. So we would deplete what we have available. I do think that the things we have planned are critical and have been deferred for a very long time. So I would ask that you keep that deposit this year.
Any other questions for Crystal? Do you want to make a proposal?
I propose that we reduce this fund by $37,500.
Any seconds? Melissa seconds. All those in favor? All those opposed? That fails. Do you want to do the other ones? Conservation?
Yeah, conservation.
Okay. Conservation land purchase. Do you want to talk to it?
Conservation land purchase, there is $344,000 in their fund right now. This is usually to put to buy land when it becomes available to them, desirable properties. Putting this off for a year is not going to slow this process down at all. They don't, to my knowledge, have a piece of land in mind yet, so.
Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Yeah, this is one I would agree with. I've always been of the mind, I mean, it's hard to know if we're going to buy I agree with Joe Cubitt that, listen, we've done a good job, put a little bit of money away each year, so we're not hit all at once. I've always found that problematic with land purchases because if we find a $2 million property with some lake frontage that we believe the town should own, we're likely going to go after it. And that means we'd have to float a bond. So I think taking 1 year off on this one doesn't hurt us at all.
Joe, do you have a comment?
Well, I'm just going to say, that the records for the MS9, I guess, is going to have like about almost 300,000 in the Conservation Commission fund. And there is the Mary Haddon fund, but that's going to be much lower once this property bond goes through, which is sometime in the next month, 2 months.
Anyone's guess?
Okay. So the Haddon fund is going to be much lower from anything you see written down any place because they got $225,000 set aside to buy this other property once the title gets cleared. And Joe, by the way, if you give $1 million, we'll name the property and lake after you.
What property are we talking about that's not...
Joe's land.
Sorry, Colin, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm sorry, what property are we referring to that's not represented on this sheet as to be spent?
Joe's talking about the $225,000 that will be spent from the Mary Haddad Fund for property over on Andover Road.
But that money is not coming from
That's coming
these
out of the
funds.
Mary-
It's a different fund. It's not the fund we're dealing with right now.
Okay.
This is
Mary
not,
Haddad fund.
that Mary Haddad fund is a completely different fund. Yes, it became available and they're spending it,
Yeah,
but we're focused on just conservation fund right now.
okay, okay. I was
I
getting
would
a
just
few.
add, as a former member of the Conservation Commission, they would like to have at least some money for next year.
I'd also add that this is one that year over year tends to get hit. Budget Committee in the past has wanted to reduce over time, so that's just kind of my impression. Any other discussions? So we have a proposal to remove the $25,000. Any seconds? Second. All those in favor? All those opposed? That fails. Anything else, John?
I gotta get home, see my game.
John's got to get home. Okay. So, seeing that, from any other Budget Committee members on any of the other capital reserves? Okay. So, based on that discussion, nothing has been decreased. So, we have 471,500. Does anyone want to make a motion to approve that?
I'll second it.
Okay. All those in favor? Aye. Any nays? Okay. Ayes have it.
Okay, next up, you can go to page 18, capital outlay land, that's $375,000. That's going to be a warrant article from the Selectmen, so there's no cutting it in half at this point. You can recommend that if you want, but you'll have the opportunity when the warrant's done to recommend or not.
Discussions?
Do you want to go through these, each section, or do you want to go the total $1,330,000?
Why don't we just ask, is there any discussions on any of the line items for the remaining three?
We have vehicles and equipment, they're all listed. The equipment, $674,135. We have capital outlay for buildings, $85,000, and improvements for $196,500. So you'll see those individually listed out on pages 18 and 19.
So the proposal would be to approve 375, 674, 85, and 196.
196.5.
196.5.
For a total of $1,330,635.
Lindsay made a motion. Any seconds? All right, we have a second. All those in favor? Any opposed? No opposings? All right.
Sewer operating fund, $1,130,517.
Any questions or discussions? Have a motion. Any seconds? John seconds. All those in favor? Any opposed? Ayes have it.
Transfers to capital reserves for the sewer, $10,000.
I'll make a motion. All those in favor? Aye. All right. So do we need to vote on the final?
Nope.
Nope.
Now, again, you're going to have the reconciliation with the Selectmen. Once you have the public hearing, you will be approving the entire budget. You can either go department by department like we just did, or you can go bottom line. That'll be up to you. This is just to get it to the Selectmen's reconciliation, because there are some differences.
All right, I would buy everybody a drink, but there's nothing open in town, so I guess next time. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Appreciate it.
We don't talk revenue, I guess, huh?